Your brain is extraordinary. It paints dreams, solves problems, builds civilizations. It composes music, writes poetry, launches rockets. And yet, buried beneath all that brilliance lies something ancient, primitive, unfinished. Because deep inside your skull lives a contradiction. A mind sculpted by millions of years of survival, fear, aggression, and instinct. A brain that evolved in the wild, but now lives in a digital world. A mind shaped for tribal life, but surrounded by cities, screens, and strangers. We like to think we're rational, that we weigh our choices carefully, reason our way through conflict, and evolve past emotional impulses. But science tells a different story. It tells us we often decide first, then justify after. That our most powerful actions aren't born in logic, but in instinct. That we're still reacting to ancient fears using ancient wiring. A flash of anger, a burst of jealousy, the urge to lash out, to retreat, to dominate. These are not glitches. They're features, left behind by evolution. We inherited them. We still use them. And in many moments, they control us. So the question is not, are we intelligent? The question is, are we in control of that intelligence? Or is something older, deeper, and more primal still driving the wheel? Because you may carry a smartphone. You may speak in multiple languages. But somewhere in the shadows of your mind, the ape still stirs. This is the story of the brain behind the brain, the silent influence of instinct, and the haunting truth that you may be more ancient than you think. And so begins Chapter 1, The Primal Brain, Evolution's Hidden Blueprint. Long before skyscrapers pierced the sky or engines roared across continents, the world pulsed with an ancient rhythm. Wind moving through grasslands, leaves whispering in the trees, the breath of beasts and the heartbeat of survival. In that silence, something extraordinary began. Not a flame, not a word, but a mind. Over 6 million years ago, in the forests of Africa, our earliest ancestors were not yet thinkers or dreamers. They were apes, neither fully prey nor entirely predator, surviving each day through instinct and emotion. But inside their skulls, slow transformations were underway. They began to stand upright, freeing their hands to grasp, strike, and shape. Their eyes turned forward, scanning open landscapes instead of branches. And within their heads, the brain didn't restart, it evolved. Evolution doesn't invent from scratch, it adapts. Like a tinkerer layering old blueprints with new designs, nature kept the ancient framework and built upon it. At the foundation of your brain is the reptilian complex, a cluster of nerves dedicated to the most basic functions. Your heartbeat, your breathing, your fight or flight reflexes. It works silently, automatically, keeping you alive whether you're asleep, scared, or staring into space. Wrapped around this ancient system is the limbic brain, the emotional center, primitive but potent. This is where the ape still lives within you. It controls your deepest instincts. Love, hate, loyalty, fear, jealousy, desire. It reacts with speed and force, long before reason has a chance to speak. It judges who you trust, who you avoid, who you challenge, and who you embrace. And above it all, evolution placed its final layer, the neocortex. This is the human mind's masterpiece, capable of logic, language, mathematics, stories, dreams, future planning, science, and philosophy. It gives us the power to imagine gods, launch rockets, write poetry, and question our own existence. But here's the twist. This crown jewel doesn't always rule. When you walk into a room and feel tension without hearing a word, that's not your logical brain talking. It's your amygdala, the vigilant, ancient part of the limbic system, scanning faces, gestures, tone, and posture for signs of threat, drawing from millions of years of emotional memory. When you flare up at an insult, freeze during confrontation, panic under pressure, or lash out without thinking, those aren't character flaws. They're the echoes of survival instincts, ancestral responses designed for a world far more dangerous and immediate than ours. Your amygdala detects fear and anger faster than your neocortex can process the situation. You feel first, understand later. Because back then, hesitation killed. A rustle in the bushes didn't offer time for careful thought. If it was a predator, thinking meant dying. If it was a rival, waiting meant defeat. Emotional speed was everything. Suspicion meant survival. Dominance preserved status. These neural circuits worked. They kept our species alive, and so they stayed. Encoded, inherited, automatic. But the world evolved. The dangers morphed. We left behind jungles for concrete towers, exchanged tribal hunts for office deadlines, replaced territorial battles with online arguments. Still, your brain can't tell the difference. It reacts as if you're still surrounded by lions and enemies. That's why criticism from your boss causes your chest to tighten. Why a cruel comment online feels like a spear to the heart. Why embarrassment feels like danger, and why rejection stings like exile. Because to your limbic system, those things are still life-threatening. Your body treats them as if your very survival is at stake. It's irrational, it's outdated, but it's also the truth of what it means to be human. And so we arrive at Chapter 2, Emotion over Logic. How the ape still makes your decisions. You believe you're in control, that your thoughts are measured, your choices rational, your opinions based on reason. But the truth is, most of your decisions happen before thought even begins. Your ancient brain, the emotional, instinctive part, still takes the lead. It reacts first, reasons second. And it does so not out of logic, but out of survival. The limbic system, the emotional ape within you, doesn't care if you're right. It only cares if you're safe. That's why you can go from calm to combative in seconds during a disagreement. A simple conversation starts smoothly, and then a word, a tone, or a glance sets something off. Your muscles tighten, your voice rises, you interrupt, you lash out, and afterward, you feel the regret. You apologize. But in that moment, you weren't in control. Your logical brain didn't speak. Your emotional circuitry did, because your ancient wiring still interprets disagreement as threat, not to your life, but to your status, which once meant access to mates, food, protection, and power. In our evolutionary past, losing status meant being pushed out of the group, and being alone meant dying. So even today, when someone questions your intelligence, your values, or your competence, your brain reacts as if your life is at stake. You argue, you withdraw, you fight or flee. Not consciously, but because your inner ape believes it's the only way to survive. That's why small conflicts feel massive, why arguments online spiral out of control, and why politics becomes personal. Your prefrontal cortex, the slow-thinking center for nuance, can't always keep up with the speed and force of the emotional brain. And political beliefs? They're often born from emotion, not fact. We're drawn to candidates and ideologies not because of spreadsheets or policies, but because of fear, hope, identity, and tribal belonging. Once a belief is tied to who we are, the amygdala guards it like a territory. Challenge it, and you're seen not as a questioner, but as an invader. Conversation shuts down, defense kicks in, and logic is sidelined. The same dynamics shape everyday choices. Why does advertising work? Because it doesn't target your reason. It goes for your instincts. A car commercial doesn't show detailed fuel data. It shows dominance, confidence, attraction, signals of status, and mating fitness. A clothing brand doesn't sell fabric. It sells the feeling of belonging. A snack ad doesn't emphasize nutrients. It shows comfort, reward, and childhood joy. Your brain is always scanning the world for safety, approval, advantage, or warning signs. It's not broken. It's adapted. Even addiction follows this path. Dopamine, the feel-good neurotransmitter, evolved to reward behaviors like eating, mating, and exploring, things that once ensured survival. But today's world bombards you with artificial triggers. Processed sugar, endless scrolling, flashing screens, likes, pornography, clickbait. Your dopamine circuits weren't built for this. So you keep chasing, craving, clicking, not because you're weak, but because your brain is trapped in a reward loop that never ends. Just like an ape hunting fruit, except this tree is digital and infinite. Attention is hijacked too. That's why headlines are designed to provoke outrage, fear, betrayal, or disgust. Because fear grabs you. It forces you to stop, to focus, to react. Your biology is tuned to threat. Even if that threat is false, your brain evolved to survive, not to fact-check. And habits? They're not laziness. They're energy-saving programs. Your ancient brain seeks patterns. Familiar routines conserve fuel. That's why you keep returning to the same snacks, apps, responses, even if you don't want to. Breaking a habit requires awareness, and awareness is slow, tiring, and fragile. Relationships are shaped the same way. How you attach to others, how you love, trust, push away, or cling, are all tied to deep emotional maps built in early life and rooted in the primal need for safety. The ape fears isolation. Being alone meant vulnerability. So when someone pulls away, or when love is lost, it can feel like actual danger. Heartbreak doesn't just hurt, it unravels security. And even morality, the compass we believe to be guided by reason, is powered mostly by gut reactions. We feel something is right or wrong first. Then we search for reasons to justify it. If a moral view becomes part of your identity, questioning it feels like betrayal. Growth becomes painful. Change feels unsafe. Because your brain doesn't crave truth. It craves safety. It associates the familiar with survival and the unfamiliar with risk. But here lies the power of the neocortex, the rational brain that can observe, reflect, and intervene. It can slow things down. It can catch the emotional reflex before it becomes action, but only if trained, only if awake. Because most of the time, we drift through life in reaction mode. Triggered, defensive, certain, confused, convinced we're acting on truth, when really we're dancing to the tune of ancient instincts. So what does this mean? It means we must show grace to ourselves and to others. It means we must understand the hidden operating system behind our daily behavior. It means we must practice the pause, to interrupt the reaction, to examine the emotion, to delay the reflex just long enough to make a better choice. That pause is the hinge of growth. That space is where evolution continues. Because civilization isn't just concrete and machines. It's the quiet, difficult art of mastering our inner animal, of saying, I feel this, but I choose better. And that might be the most human thing we've ever done. And this brings us to Chapter 3. Can we outgrow the ape within? Because while we've come a long way, from sharpened stones to satellite signals, from hunting mammoths to mapping genomes, from fire circles to artificial intelligence. There's a deeper question that remains. Have we truly changed ourselves? The ape brain, the one built for survival, dominance, fear, and tribe, still lives inside us. We've seen how it drives anger, fuels tribalism, craves reward, and resists change. But what if we could interrupt that story? What if, instead of reacting, we began observing? What if evolution didn't stop with biology but now continued through consciousness? Because unlike any other species on Earth, we know we have an ape brain. And that knowledge gives us a unique advantage. We can choose. We can choose to reflect before reacting. We can choose to forgive instead of fight. We can build laws, ethics, stories, and rituals, all designed to guide the ancient mind into a cooperative future. In fact, much of civilization is exactly that. A system designed to balance instinct with structure. Rules are how we contain dominance urges. Education is how we interrupt ignorance. Art is how we channel emotion. Meditation is how we train attention. Science is how we override superstition. These aren't just cultural tools, they're evolutionary scaffolding. They help hold up the modern mind when the primal one starts to slip. And yet, the struggle continues, because the ape doesn't vanish, it sleeps, and under stress, fear, or trauma, it wakes. No amount of knowledge guarantees control. Even world leaders, scientists, and spiritual teachers, under pressure, can fall back into the old wiring. They snap, they betray, they protect themselves, because instinct is faster than wisdom. It always has been. So the real task isn't to eliminate the ape inside. The real task is to build habits strong enough to carry us when instinct rises, and that starts with awareness. Think of the brain like a layered radio. The oldest station, the limbic broadcast, is always playing. It's loud, emotional, and urgent. But you can tune into a higher frequency if you know it exists. That frequency is reflection, empathy, long-term thinking, wisdom, but it's a fragile signal. Stress drowns it. Fear silences it. Tribalism overrides it. That's why modern life requires mental training, not just education, but emotional intelligence, the ability to sit with discomfort, to notice bias, to pause in reaction, to stay present when the brain screams to flee or fight. This isn't weakness, it's mastery. Monks train it. Therapists teach it. Leaders need it. And every one of us can learn it. It's not about suppressing emotion. It's about knowing its origin. You feel rage? Good. Where is it coming from? What ancient fear is it protecting? What status loss is it defending? You feel envy. Why? What need does it expose? You feel disconnected, insecure, or on edge. Ask yourself, is this now, or is this an echo? Because so often, it's not the present causing the pain, it's the past pulling your strings. Evolution may have written the script, but you can rewrite the ending. And there's something else to remember. We're not just built to survive. We're also built to connect. The same brain that feels threat also feels empathy. The same neural circuits that feel rage also allow for forgiveness. The same species that once fought for mates and food also painted caves, sang songs, told stories, and held hands in the dark. Compassion isn't a modern invention. It's an ancient bond. Apes comfort each other. Elephants mourn. Dolphins protect their wounded. We didn't invent care. We inherited it. So the capacity for something better is not foreign. It's already within us. It just needs space to grow. Because if the brain is a battlefield between the ancient and the possible, then every moment is a chance to choose, instinct or intention, reflex or reflection, ape or human. And maybe that's the point. Maybe evolution didn't end. Maybe it simply passed the torch from nature to you. The next step in our species won't be genetic. It'll be internal. It won't be bigger brains. It'll be better choices. Because if we are to truly outgrow the ape within, we must first recognize when it's speaking and have the courage to answer with silence. And finally, we arrive at Chapter 4, the mirror inside. Consciousness awakens. There is a moment, often quiet and unannounced, when something strange happens in the human mind. A flicker, a pause, a question that wasn't there before. You find yourself watching your own thoughts, not just having them. You feel anger and suddenly ask, why? You catch yourself in a habit and wonder, is this me or just repetition? This moment is the beginning of something new in the evolutionary story, because for millions of years, creatures lived and died without ever reflecting on what it meant to live or die. But then something changed. A mirror appeared, not a physical one, but a mental mirror. Consciousness didn't just react anymore. It began to observe, and that changed everything. Somewhere along our evolutionary path, the brain developed not just intelligence, but self-awareness. Not just fire, but introspection. Not just memory, but meaning. This capacity didn't erase the ape. It layered something new on top of it. And this mirror inside you, the ability to watch your thoughts, to question your reactions, to choose your story, is the reason why we paint, write, forgive, protest, create, dream, and heal. It's the reason we build more than shelters. We build futures. And yet this gift is fragile. Most of the time we live without it. We're not watching. We're drifting. We scroll. We consume. We chase what others chase. We react like machines driven by inherited reflexes. The mirror fogs. And when it does, we fall back into the old story. Fear wins, anger leads, cycles repeat. But when we remember, even for a moment, to look into that mirror, we come alive in a different way. We become capable of changing not just what we do, but why we do it. The first time a human mourned the dead, the mirror was present. The first time someone chose mercy instead of revenge, the mirror guided the hand. The first time someone stood up against a powerful lie, knowing the cost, that was the mirror reflecting truth. This isn't philosophy. It's biology moving towards something higher. Evolution doesn't just shape bodies. It shapes awareness. And now, the question isn't just, will we survive? But will we awaken? Because the real battle isn't out there. It's in here, between impulse and insight, between repetition and choice, between the reactive ape and the quiet witness, and this witness, the part of you that watches, reflects, pauses, isn't new in the way fire or tools were new. It's quiet, subtle, but it changes everything. Because now you can do more than react. You can rewrite, you can reshape, you can choose to become someone your instincts would never predict. But this takes effort, practice, attention. The mirror must be polished daily through mindfulness, reflection, self-honesty, and courage. You must learn to sit with discomfort, to question your own narratives, to notice when the emotional brain wants to take over. And slowly, with each act of awareness, the mirror grows clearer. You begin to see not just the ape and the spark, but the space between them. And in that space, you find your true strength. Not control, but clarity. Not suppression, but understanding. You realize you are not your thoughts. You are the one witnessing them. And in that realization, a new chapter in human evolution quietly begins. One where survival is not the goal, conscious living is. And this brings us to Chapter 5. The Hidden War, Emotion versus Awareness in Everyday Life. Every day, without knowing it, you fight a war inside. Not a dramatic, cinematic battle, but a quiet, relentless tension between the part of you that reacts and the part of you that reflects. It starts before you open your eyes. You reach for your phone, not because you plan to, but because your brain craves novelty, stimulation, reward. You scroll, you compare, you absorb 100 tiny signals, and already your emotional mind is activated. A post makes you feel behind in life. A headline triggers fear. A message stirs irritation, all before breakfast. You haven't chosen any of it, your ancient mind did. That's the hidden war. It's not good versus evil. It's not brain versus heart. It's reaction versus awareness. Your limbic system, shaped by millions of years of survival, wants speed, certainty, comfort, and control. It wants to keep you safe, even if that means avoiding truth, lashing out, or staying small. But your higher mind, the reflective neocortex, seeks something more difficult: meaning, honesty, growth. And those two parts often want different things. That's why you can want to improve your life, but sabotage your own goals. Why you can long for connection, but pull away from intimacy. Why you can know what's right and still choose what's easy. Because the emotional brain screams louder. Its signals feel more urgent. Its rewards are quicker. And unless you pause, unless you intervene, it wins. You snap at a loved one not because you wanted to, but because your brain confused disagreement with threat. You avoid a risk not because it's unsafe, but because your mind mistook uncertainty for danger. You procrastinate not because you're lazy, but because unfamiliar effort triggered a fear response. These patterns repeat silently, shaping your days, your relationships, your identity. And the tragedy is, most people never notice. They live entire lives reacting, entire careers, entire marriages, entire belief systems, built on instincts mistaken for wisdom. But the truth is, you're not broken. You're just ancient. Your brain is using outdated software in a hyper-modern world. The key is not to silence the emotional brain, but to guide it, to create space between the trigger and the action. And that space, that split second of pause, is where awareness lives. That's where your power begins. Awareness doesn't mean perfection. It means recognition. It means catching yourself mid-pattern and asking, what's really happening here? It means responding instead of reacting, choosing instead of repeating. It means rewriting the program, one conscious moment at a time. And with practice, that space grows. The voice of the higher mind becomes clearer. You notice your jealousy and don't let it lead. You feel the anger, but choose patience. You sense fear, but move forward anyway. This doesn't happen once. It happens every day, in a million micro decisions. And each time you choose awareness, you're not just improving your mood or your day. You're evolving your mind. You're moving the human story forward. Because this hidden war, though ancient, is not unwinnable. You are not doomed to repeat the patterns of the past. You are capable of watching them, understanding them, and rising above them. And if enough people do this, not just learn, but live it, the world begins to change. One brain, one pause, one choice at a time. And now, we return to where this all leads. Chapter 6. The Human Spark. Because you are not just a brain, you are a battleground, a living intersection between ancient instinct and conscious evolution. Inside your skull is not simply tissue and neurons, but a living archive of everything your ancestors faced, feared, fought, and survived. It holds a story millions of years old, encoded not in words, but in reactions, in the language of hunger, rage, lust, terror, and triumph. That primal mind was once your greatest ally, honed to survive a merciless world filled with predators, scarcity, and uncertainty. And for that, you owe it thanks. Without it, there would be no humans, no history, no you. But now, you live in a different world. And that very same mind, once your most vital tool, now often becomes a barrier. It flares with anxiety at emails, not lions. It triggers jealousy over status updates, not mating threats. It fuels division when unity is needed, sparks outrage where reflection is wiser, and makes you impulsive when the moment asks for intention. Unless you learn to see it, to notice the voice behind the voice, you remain at its mercy. We keep running the same ancient programs: conflict, fear, posturing, tribalism, dominance. The same reactions, the same cycles, played out on new stages, boardrooms instead of battlefields, comment sections instead of campsites. But here's the truth. You are not just the ape. You are also the light. You are the rare species that can feel and choose, that can burn with emotion, yet step back and reflect, that can carry the old fire of survival and still decide to be kind. You are the only creature that can hold contradiction in one mind, rage and restraint, fear and faith, instinct and reason, and choose which voice to follow. That choice is the human spark. It's not something evolution handed you. It's something you awaken. And each time you use it, you tilt humanity forward. Every moment you interrupt a reactive impulse, when you breathe through the panic, when you ask yourself why before acting, you weaken the grip of the past and strengthen the path ahead. When you choose empathy over dominance, patience over pride, curiosity over certainty, you evolve, not just as an individual, but as a species. The next leap in our story won't come through taller foreheads or faster neurons. It will come through awareness. It will come from people willing to pause, to notice, to choose. Because the ape brain will always speak. It's part of your design. Let it speak. Let it roar. Let it warn and ache and cry. But then, let your higher self decide what happens next. That is your greatest strength. Not intelligence, not speed, not power, but presence. The awareness to say, I feel this, but I don't have to be this. That is not denial. It's liberation. Because true freedom is not the absence of fear or anger. It's the ability to feel them and still respond with clarity. You'll still feel the pull. You'll still stumble. You'll still flare with emotion. But now, you'll know where it's coming from. And that knowledge, that tiny sliver of awareness, changes everything. Not just for you, for your children, your community, your species. Because self-awareness isn't just a private victory, it's a ripple. One person choosing calm can shift the mood of a room. One person choosing empathy can end a fight before it begins. One person choosing growth can light a path others didn't even know was there. So do you still think like an ape? Maybe. But now, you don't have to live like one.